You're listening to Sasquatch Syndicate.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal or?
I can't tell. All I know is that my central light came on and I just happened to glimpse and see this thing running across the yard.
And all the ape believers don't want any of the paranormal believers to say anything because they're all whacked and screwed up and we don't want them. And all the paranormal believers don't want, they're going to the ape believers saying, well, you're all closed-minded. You're not open to the fact that it does this and it does that.
And I look over my left shoulder and this creature is running through the woods and it's bulldozing the brush down. And I knew, man, this thing is going to get me.
Welcome to Sasquatch Syndicate. I'm your host Chuck, out in Seattle, Washington, along with Paul in Portland, Oregon. Thanks to everyone for listening and those following us at SasquatchSyndicate.com and on our social media outlets. Happy October, everyone. We hope you're having a fantastic fall season. Of course, Halloween's one of my favorite holidays, so I'm really looking forward to October. But I know many of you have written into the show. You're out there struggling. It's a tough time of year. Summer's over. Seasonal depression. It's dark. But we've got to stay positive. So if you're out there struggling, let's take a deep breath and let it go. Trick or treat.
I try to fill my mind with anything but him. So caught up in it. So caught up in it. Don't wanna love him anymore. I'm not gaining anything. So why am I still so caught up with him? I wanna lay in my bed, clear from all that's in my head. Nah, I wanna try something new, live another point of view. Nah, just another me without the ghost of us, without the thought of us. Just another day without the ghost of us, without the thought of us. I'm trying to leave the house, stay busy, ain't go out, but so caught up in it, so caught up in it. I know I should be glad for all the things we had, but it's hard to forget when he might get assistant. I wanna lay in my bed, clear from all that's in my head. Nah, I wanna try something new, live another point of view. Nah, just another me without the ghost of us, without the thought of us. Just another day without the ghost of us, without the thought of us. Wish I didn't need him, no. Wish I didn't need him, no. Wish I didn't love him anymore, no. Wish I didn't need him, no. Wish I didn't need him, no. Wish I didn't love him anymore, no. Guess things happen for a reason, but what's the reason it hurts so bad? I wanna lay in my bed, clear from all that's in my head. Nah, I wanna try something new, live another point of view. Nah, just another me without the ghost of us, without the thought of us. Just another day without the ghost of us, without the thought of us. Wish I didn't need him, no. Wish I didn't need him, no. Wish I didn't love him anymore, no. Wish I didn't need him, no.
So on to this year's Halloween special. Tonight we're joined by Bill Sheehan. He is the author of Bigfoot Terror in the Woods. Of course, Bill appeared last year on the Sasquatch Syndicate Holiday Special. but we wanted to bring Bill back to talk about some of his more scary and haunting tales that he's collected over the years. So Bill, welcome to the show. But before we get started on tonight's festivities, I thought maybe you could share a little bit about some of your more favorite and fond childhood memories growing up and your experiences on Halloween there in New York.
Wow. We had it, we were pretty wild over here in New York, my friend. We used to go out egging, doing malicious things, running around the neighborhood, putting eggs in people's mailboxes, egging cars, and egging each other and other people, shaving cream, throwing toilet paper up in trees. And the next day, everybody would be going around the neighborhood seeing all of these rolls of white Scott tissue dangling from the trees. But, I guess we always enjoyed as kids the thrill of going out on a nice night, particularly if we didn't get rained out on a Halloween. The knocking on the doors, sneaking around in the dark, the collecting of all of the candies, and things like that. And then at the end of the night or the following day, we'd get together and trade off our candies, what you like, what I like, and we'd horse trade the goodies we had acquired the night before. And, I lived in a big neighborhood, a lot of families, a lot of children. And so there was no lack of houses to go to. And we would fill up, like we'd take a pillowcase with us to go trick-or-treating. And, we'd fill up like a half a pillowcase just going around the neighborhood with goodies from all the families, So I don't know what it was like near you, but, we had a lot of kids, a lot of costumes. It was really a big, big deal around here.
Yeah, definitely good times. And I know and I think most of the listeners know, but I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. Now, back in the 70s and 80s, I'm not going to say Omaha was lawless, but it certainly wasn't what it is today in terms of, population density, etc. And we had free reign as kids. And, our parents, we had to be home by the time the streetlights were on, except on Halloween. And to your point, if it wasn't raining or snowing, we'd stay out as late as we could and, fill up those pillowcases, sit on the curb, eating chocolate, getting the sugar rush. And then we'd stay up as late as we could playing kick the can. Now, for those out there that don't know what kick the can is, you get a group of your friends and you get an old tin can, like a can of beans. You'd empty it out. You'd put it upside down in the middle of the street. You'd designate one guy as the kicker. He'd kick the can as far as he could. And then he'd have to run and get the can and bring it back and put it on the spot. And then that was home base. So then the next thing you had to do was go find all of your friends. And if you had to venture off and somebody else came out of the bushes and ran and kicked the can, they'd win the game. Well, we had this guy, his name was Joe Petters, and he was about 70 or 80 years old at the time, I think. Long live Joe Petters. But I don't know if he stayed up looking out of his window, and I think he just did it for spite. But we'd run, and whenever you were trying to run to kick the can, if you came out from behind his arborvitaes or his evergreen, he'd flip the light on, and the other guy would see you coming. So, they were good times, to your point, the egging. We used to throw crab apples at stuff, hit each other with our bags. I remember a kid got in a candy pillow fight and had all kinds of bruises on him. So definitely different times, but it was great. And of course, we didn't have the costumes that the kids do now. I don't know what you had there as a kid.
Well, when I was a kid, most of the costumes, I don't even know if you see them anymore. This was prior to the grotesque rubber masks and a lot of the stuff you had today. And I'm talking about when we were children. The costumes were generally bought in a little box. They had a cardboard box with a clear panel of plastic over the front. And through the panel, you could see what the face mask was. And then they'd show like a picture on the box of like a kid wearing the outfit. And the outfits were generally flimsy little things that your mother tied on the back of you, once you stepped into it. And you put the mask on your face with the little rubber elastic band behind it to hold it on.
Yeah, and Bill, do you remember, you get those masks, you try to put it on, and that stupid rubber band would snap you in the hands or in the back of the head?
Yeah, that's the way it was. And then, sometimes if you had a mother that was a little creative, you might put your father's old plaid woolen shirt on and a pair of beat-up pants, and maybe they'd stuff some straw into the arms or have it coming out the neck, and you'd wear a weird hat and paint some scarecrow cheeks on you, like the scarecrow from The Wizard of Oz. Or, put a set of those plastic fangs in your mouth so you look like Count Dracula. Doctor up some type of black coat or cape, and all of a sudden you were Bela Lugosi,
Yeah, and of course, if you grew up in the 70s and you were part of the Kiss Army, you could also, double up that vampire costume in the cape, and you could use it all year as, role-playing and jumping off the couch playing Gene Simmons or Paul Stanley or one of those guys as well.
Well, now listen, we're talking pre-Kiss. I'm going back a while ago, Chuck. Kiss was way later on in my life, and I don't even think they had the boxed costumes anymore when those guys were around,
Yeah, some great times and great memories there for sure. Now, Bill, at least in my neighborhood, we had a lot of kids we hung out with. We were kind of a little clan or pack, but, we had multiple streets, multiple neighborhoods, multiple blocks, but you hung out with the kids on your block. And, I don't know what it was like out there in New York, but there was a lot more kids back then, it seemed like anyways.
We had so many children in our neighborhood. The school buses would fill up just in our block. So, depending what the grades were and who was going to what school, by the time the bus went around our neighborhood, it was just about full. And on your way to school, there were maybe a few additional stops where there was one kid here, two kids over there, and next thing you know, you were at school. So we had a lot of kids growing up, which can be good and can be bad, depending who you hang around with and what your upbringing was like.
Well, definitely fun to reminisce, and hopefully that brought back some fond memories for everybody else. So thanks again for sharing, Bill.
Yeah, no, it's all good stuff.
All right, well, I've got my popcorn and my Twix, so what you got for us, Bill?
I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that of all the people who could run across such a finding in the woods, this guy, David Brinks, has spent the past 17 years as an orthopedic surgeon. And I'll step aside now and allow you to listen to what David Brinks had to testify as exactly what he found in the Kootenai by Mount Oki on October 7th in 1999. He said as follows: "As I told you, Bill, when we first made contact, I did not personally see anything in regards to a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch-type creature, but it was rather what I found while on the hunt that troubled me to such an extent that to this very day I am haunted by it in my thoughts. As I also told you, I have given up hunting in the deep woods entirely. October 7th, 1999 was my last day in the forest. I have likewise also sold off my entire collection of long rifles, which had been quite extensive and expensive as a result of what I encountered on that day. I had hiked in about 6 miles following Tokum Creek to where I had reached a point where I was in, shall I say, the shadow of Mount Oki. While hiking in this entire area, it is full of life of a variety of sorts. Animals both large and small abound, as well as birds and critters of every sort imaginable, providing one is looking. I was, as I said, about 6 miles in, when the realization came upon me that everything had grown eerily still and silent. This had happened so gradually that it must have been over the course of perhaps a mile before I actually stood still in one spot to look and listen in order to confirm my thoughts and my feelings. When the realization had struck me and my hunch had been confirmed in reference to the stillness and lifelessness I was encountering, a cold chill went through my body like a lightning bolt from head to toe. I had never experienced a feeling as such in my entire life of hunting. This was followed by a feeling of imminent danger and the thought that I may even lose my life. Personally, I have over 10 years of education, and I am not used to psychological breakdowns of any sort taking hold of me. My career and my patience being completely reliant on my ability to be level-headed and skilled at both what I do and who I am. I remember standing my ground and trying to gain control of my thoughts for some 20 minutes, because after all, I couldn't exactly run out of here with my gear. At some point, as I felt as though I had somewhat normalized again and began to move into the timber by the base of Mount Oki, following what appeared to be a rather broad game trail, which from the looks of it seemed to be well traveled by large animals in the area. I came upon what I will describe as a small side path, which was leading through a wall of brush that was about 10 feet tall. Walking through this wall of brush, this small trail opened up into what looked like a cleared campsite. In other words, the ground in here was virtually cleared of debris and was so tamped down that it looked like hardpack. It measured some 30 feet by 15 feet, being oblong in its dimensions. Scattered about in this clearing at first glance were hundreds upon hundreds of animal bones strewn randomly about. As my mind was trying to process that which my eyes were now seeing, my vision shifted to what appeared to be a camouflage jacket laying off to the left side, near the fringe of the clearing. I stepped over to take a closer look, when I realized that the jacket was still wrapped around who had been its owner. The waistline of the coat was collapsed to the ground, and when I lifted it up with a stick, the remains of a human pelvis were visible, devoid of the lower extremities. Upon probing the upper torso with the branch, the coat was still supported by what I assumed was the intact rib cage, as well as the skeletal hands and arms extending from what were now severely deteriorated sleeves. As I now examined what was a severely damaged skull, my observations confirmed that the entirety of the facial structure from the maxilla to the frontal bone, inclusive of the nasal, zygomatic, temporal, orbital, and the lesser bones, had been impacted by some type of blunt force trauma, which rendered the entire face compressed to some 5 inches within the skull. I knew immediately that this had not been done by a bear, and no human was capable of delivering such a blow. The head looked as though a 7-inch round block of steel had been pounded into it front on. I started to tremble and shake quite violently as I stood looking over this apparent victim of some type of hideous murder. But why this individual had found his place here with all these other bones was incomprehensible to my rational way of thinking. Within the confines of this space, there were no bones visible that still had flesh or tissue attached to them in any state of decomposition. And yet here I was, standing in the middle of animal and human remains on a patch of ground that was so worn and hardened that not so much as a weed was coming forth out of it. With my gloves on, I attempted to do a search of the remaining pocket areas of the coat and came up with a business card for an insurance agency about 200 miles away from where I now was. Having made my way out of the woods and back to civilization, I immediately reported my findings to the local authorities. I gave them the card and offered to take them back where I made the find if they desired to meet me to do so, to which they responded they would let me know if they needed any further assistance. To this day, I am tormented by having found this torso with no legs lying in the sea of bones within the forest. Something or someone had spent a lot of time in that clearing to have worn it down to the state in which I had found it. It had the appearance of a campsite that was used on a regular basis by a family of 5, and yet nothing was there when I had arrived. Out of everything that I had seen and felt, it was the damage that had been rendered to the individual's face that haunts me to this very day. Death from such an impact was certainly instantaneous, and yet what had performed such an evil act was unknown. I contacted you because my own thought process had brought me around to the notion that this was done by a Sasquatch. I have never heard of nor known of a bear to deliver such a blow, and the remains of the jacket showed no signs of having been slashed or clawed in any way, other than the natural breakdown of the fabric having been left outside in the elements for a prolonged period of time. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I can't imagine a find like that. Definitely, something that would haunt you for a long time.
And here you have, again, we have an orthopedic surgeon, likes hunting, gun collection, goes out, likes to do this when he's a stress reliever. And of all the people who could run across this, somebody who knows, human anatomy, skeletal system, the whole 9 yards, he's the guy that runs across this thing and makes the presumptive jump that, nothing, a bear, no creature, a man punching him in the face, whatever, nothing known to him in the woods there was capable of delivering such a blow, and the fact that the lower limbs were missing. What that's all about. Now, I had a conversation with a hunter in Idaho who's calling me to give report, and actually, he actually called me to tell me about some information and photographs he has months ago, and I hadn't heard from him. And I tried to contact him via email. I also had his phone number. And he never got back to me. So I chalked it up to a lot of malarkey. Well, he reaches out to me one day and he says, Bill, my apologies. I've been so busy with the farm and his business that he hasn't had the chance. But he said, when the season winds down, we're going to get together and I'm going to send you what I told you I would send you, and we're gonna hash this out. But when I had him on the phone, we got to talking. And I was telling him about, found bodies, limbs missing, typically the leg. And we were discussing how difficult it would be to remove a leg from a human being. And he was telling me from a hunter's perspective just how hard it is to cut the leg off of a big animal. Certainly you're not going to grab it and stand on it and yank it off. And he was saying that it would require a tremendous amount of forcefulness and strength to wrench a human leg away from the body. And, I'm not a hunter. I mean, I shoot, I target shoot, I shotgun shoot, skeet trap. I don't hunt. I have no desire to hunt, although I have friends that do. And to hear that, one of the things that's great about interviewing people is I get an education in and from the hunter's perspective relative to the how and why things happen and what could be naturally and what is not natural. Because these guys know. They know what goes on.
For sure. And, Paul and I, we've interviewed a lot of hunters over the years. And we're not talking about birdsmen that go out on the weekend shooting pheasant or quail. I mean, we're talking about deep woodsmen, mountain men. These are people that live off the land. They survive off of nature and wildlife. And these people are in the know, to your point. So always compelling, and it's frightening. You start thinking about what they had to experience to leave their way of life. It says a lot. All right, we're going to take another short break. I'm going to grab a Twix and maybe even a Diet Coke, and we're going to stay up kicking the can with Bill Sheehan. We'll be right back.
I could stop pretending that I wanted this to happen. I could just say it, say how I feel now. But my tongue is like a wall, keeping words safe in my heart. I can never say that, but I get too far in my thoughts. They take me back to the start, what we were, like we're still all good. I get too far in my thoughts. They take me back to the start, what we were, like we're still all good. You know I miss you the most when I'm lonely. You know I miss you the most when I'm lonely. When it's scary to give in, but somehow love always wins. But then I'm lonely, and my mind doesn't understand. I get too far in my thoughts. They take me back to the start, what we were, like we're still all good. I get too far in my thoughts. They take me back to the start, what we were, like we're still all good. You know I miss you the most when I'm lonely. You know I miss you the most when I'm lonely. You know I miss you the most when I'm lonely. You know I miss you the most when I'm lonely. You know I miss you the most.
All right, well, welcome back, everybody. It is about 2:52 a.m. New York time. So I just wanted to say we are now approaching the witching hour, and probably a great segue to our next encounter. Bill, what you got?
It was told to me by a guy named Constantino Aiello, whose friends call him Tino. And I have to tell you that having sat face to face with Tino, there's nothing tiny about Tino. He's like 6'8", close to 300 pounds, a beast. So in this case, to me, it was Bigfoot versus Bigfoot in the Monongahela forest. And here's what Tino had to say. He said, "My friend Reese and I are both veterans of the armed services. I being a former Army Ranger, and Reese having served in the Marines. The two of us work out together, and we both enjoy some good outdoor hiking and adventuring whenever possible. During the second week of September in 2003, we had gotten together for a weekend of backpacking in the Monongahela National Forest region. It was early Sunday morning. Having spent the night in our tent near the Gowdner's Knob scenic area, that we awoke to a dense, soaking fog with visibility of only 100 feet at best. One more reason," he says, "to bring a compass and to be familiar with your surrounds. was that there was absolutely nothing to go by as far as landmarks or anything else was concerned. We were completely socked in by the fog, and who knew when it would lift? So we prepared ourselves a little breakfast and decided to commence our hike through a predetermined trail in what are known as the Big Trees. This trail, even on a sunny day, can present a hiker with very limited visibility. The trail is narrow and rough, meandering about through the large trees and the lower forest within it. I can tell you that I actually felt that something was wrong that day as we began our hike. I only say this because it was the same feeling that I had one morning in Afghanistan, when our patrol went out on recon and lost 9 men in an ambush. We had a map. We knew where the trail would lead, providing there was, in fact, a trail to follow. If there was no trail, our compasses would keep us on course. As we entered the forest, the fog in the trees was like soup. Our visibility had lessened to well under 50 feet, if not less. There would be no running in here, for the trail was so rutted and root-infested that you could easily turn an ankle or worse just by walking and not paying attention. Having said that, we were walking with our heads down 50% of the time. There wasn't much to see in that we were in a cloud with silhouettes of trees appearing and disappearing like ghosts. The forest was eerily silent in a way that only a hunter can describe. It was similar to being underwater, which is the way that I will describe it. I don't know if you or your readers have ever heard a tree as it gives way and falls in the woods, but I have. There is generally a large crack as the trunk reaches its breaking point, which is followed by the crashing sounds of the tree smashing its way down through the neighboring trees, finding its way to the earth below. As I said to you, we were immersed in this deadly silence when I heard the loud crack of a tree giving way to our right side in the fog. Knowing what I was hearing, I grabbed Reese, pulled him behind a tree to our left, and told him to duck. We had no way of knowing how far away this tree was, how tall it was, and in what direction it was falling. For all we knew, it could be coming down on top of us in a matter of seconds. The initial crack was followed by the thrashing and crashing of the tree falling through the canopy, ending with a loud thud as it met the ground. To me, it sounded very close to our position on the trail. Reese said to me, "Damn, that was a close call, Tino. Thank God that didn't come down on top of us, or we both could be dead." We took a little breather to compose ourselves, and still the forest was quiet. I have to say that when the tree fell, something told me it was no accident. I have no way of quantifying what I just said, other than that was the way I felt in that moment, having already told you about my feelings when we started off that morning. We had only been walking for maybe another 15 minutes when we heard some loud rustling and snapping of branches off to the same side of the trail that the tree had fallen. These noises to me sounded deliberate. In other words, something or someone had made them intentionally for us to hear. Reese and I had both stopped to listen as we slowly withdrew our knives. It was only a matter of seconds later that we started to hear what sounded like a large, heavy-footed animal stomping repeatedly on the forest floor. What we were hearing audibly reminded me in my mind's eye of an old Western when the Indians were stomping around a fire going from foot to foot doing a war party dance. I mean no disrespect. I am only trying to bring to life what I was visualizing. The stomping had stopped as abruptly as it had started. So we began to slowly move forward on the trail. At this point in time, it made no difference if we went forward or back. We couldn't see anything, and we couldn't move any faster in either direction. I think we had advanced maybe 100 feet when a log came flying out of the fog and crashed just ahead of me on the trail. I had actually seen it come out of the fog. Whatever had thrown this could not have seen us either, and was obviously going by instinct with the throw. The log was substantial in size, and it could easily have hit us. This thing, whatever it was now toying with us, and Reese was pissed off. He shouted, "Come out here when you can be seen, and we'll cut you down to size." Well, everything went eerily silent again, and both of us stepped off the side of the trail, grabbing some stout branches that we broke into a club. Now we each had a club and a knife. And I can tell you right now, if a man had stepped out of the fog right then and there, we would have beat him to death on the spot without mercy or remorse. We were terrified, and we had moved perhaps another 50 feet when we heard a grunt. It was deep and resonating, and whatever had made that sound was large and not a man. We were moving through what was like a snake-like turn in the trail, and I couldn't see 15 feet in any direction. This was the worst fog yet that we had encountered. I distinctly remember looking to my right and then turning my head as I proceeded to take the next step forward when, in the very fringe of the mist, there stood a Sasquatch with the fog floating around it like a vision from hell. Reese saw it a second after me, and we stood our ground, shoulder to shoulder. I'm 6'8", and I was looking up at this beast like a basketball rim. The mist was wafting over its body like a veil, and its face had the expression that it was going to attack. It was the most intense and evil grimace that I had ever seen. I would have to say that its shoulder width was at least 5 to 6 feet, and it was covered in wet hair that was clinging to its body. I can put up 350 pounds on the bench, and I felt insignificant in its presence. The two of us were bracing ourselves for the attack. My mind was rehearsing how I would slash and fight until we either prevailed or died in the woods. The three of us stood there face to face for about a minute, and then, with one quick step, the beast stepped back into the fog. We couldn't hear anything and were expecting at any moment an attack from any direction. For 20 minutes we waited. It was during that time that the fog began to lift. We could actually almost see now 100 feet around us, and this beast was nowhere in sight. We stepped up the pace and made it clear out of the forest double time. And by the time we had cleared the timber, the sun was beginning to burn through the clouds. And for me, it was like awakening from a nightmare. We collapsed in a field, neither being able to quite comprehend what had happened. I was certain at the time when we had seen it that the situation was not going to have a happy ending for either of us. The Sasquatch certainly would have been cut up badly, even if it killed us. Maybe it was capable of seeing that for itself. We were facing it, seemed to grin, and I could see its upper fang teeth extending about halfway down into its lower bite. They weren't like a tiger's, but more like that of Dracula. Its arms and body looked like it was in a perpetual state of flexing. It was a living powerhouse of pure muscle and strength. Having now seen it for ourselves, we now believe that this monster had knocked a tree down over initially to intimidate us. Whether it was half dead or not, we will never know. But it was most definitely a large tree. This we could tell by the noise that it had made when it hit the ground. The earth actually shook the moment it made impact. Understand me, please. This is a monster with no human origins whatsoever. Those who think otherwise are sadly mistaken in their beliefs. It is an animal of immense proportions and capabilities, and it is not to be taken lightly by anyone. Just freaking super human, mega beast, whatever you want to call it. These guys came face to face with it in the fog, and as you heard them say, they were prepared to fight, thinking probably they would be on the losing end of it, even having fought. I mean, it's just like, whatever you want to think, the Hulk, the whatever, like, how can you prevail against something like this, and win?
Yeah, well, speaking of winning, I think your endurance there is a little bit later at night than me. I think I'm starting to fade. But when you were recounting that tale, I was thinking about that B movie. It's called Troll Hunter. I think for the listeners out there, if you haven't seen that movie, pick it up on your favorite outlet. It's a little bit older, but it's a great movie. And, when you start to think about, size of this creature versus the human and the tales and really kind of what the mock-up looks like, that movie really relates to me and some of the tales that we hear. So anyways, all right. Well, Bill, thanks again for coming on tonight. We made it past the witching hour. I certainly appreciate you coming on Sasquatch Syndicate. I know our listeners do as well. Again, you can pick up Bill's books. Again, Bigfoot Terror in the Woods. Bill also has a new podcast. You can pick that up on your favorite outlet as well. And Bill, thanks again for coming on Sasquatch Syndicate. We really appreciate it. I know our listeners do as well.
Okay, Chuck.
This concludes our October 2019 podcast. Sasquatch Syndicate will return on Friday, November 1st. Thanks to all of our listeners and those that have been out to our website and those following us on social media. Sasquatch is a controversial subject, so for all the believers and disbelievers and those that will tell you they have all the answers, just remember we're flying through space at 700 miles per hour. Buckle up.